The moment Elena Rodriguez pushed open the heavy glass door of La Bella Vita, she knew she'd made a mistake. The restaurant gleamed with polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers that cast dancing shadows across walls adorned with expensive Italian artwork. Every table was draped in crisp white linen, and the soft murmur of wealthy patrons filled the air like a symphony of privilege. Elena glanced down at her worn sneakers, her faded jeans, and the oversized jacket that had seen too many winters. Her fingers instinctively moved to the small pendant hanging from her neck, a simple silver star, tarnished with age but precious beyond measure. She'd been walking for hours, hungry and exhausted, when the warm glow from the restaurant's windows had drawn her in like a beacon. Just one meal, she'd thought. Just enough to make it through another day. But now, standing in the doorway with every eye in the room turning toward her, Elena felt the familiar sting of not belonging, of being invisible in a world that only saw what you wore and what you owned. "Can I help you?" The voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. Elena looked up to see a man approaching, tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with silver hair swept back from a face that wore authority like a second skin. This was Marco Santelli, the owner, and his expression made it clear that help was the last thing he intended to offer. I was hoping to get something to eat," Elena said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Marco's eyes swept over her in one dismissive glance, taking in every detail of her appearance with barely concealed disgust. "This is a five-star establishment, not a soup kitchen," he said coldly. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Heat flooded Elena's cheeks. Around them, conversations had stopped. Silverware paused mid-air. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen to the woman who dared to enter a place she clearly couldn't afford. "Please," Elena said, reaching into her pocket with trembling fingers. "I have money. I can pay." She pulled out a crumpled collection of bills and loose change, everything she had left in the world. It wasn't much, maybe enough for an appetizer in a place like this, but it was honest money, earned from cleaning houses and doing odd jobs wherever she could find them. Marco didn't even look at the money. "Get out of my restaurant," he said, his voice rising. "You're disturbing my guests. If you don't leave now, I'll call security." Elena's eyes burned with unshed tears. She'd faced rejection before, countless times, but it never got easier. The hunger gnawing at her stomach felt like nothing compared to the hunger to be seen as human, to be treated with dignity. She turned toward the door, her vision blurring. That's when it happened. As Elena moved, the pendant around her neck caught the light from the chandelier above, sending a small prism of silver across the wall. Marco's eyes followed the flash, and for the first time, he actually looked at the necklace. His face, so stern and unyielding moments before, suddenly went pale. His mouth opened, then closed. His hand reached out as if moving on its own. "Wait," he breathed, the word barely audible. Elena stopped, confused by the sudden change in his voice. "That necklace," Marco said, his voice shaking now. "Where did you get that necklace?" Elena's hand moved protectively to the pendant. "It was my mother's," she said defensively. "She gave it to me before she died." "Your mother?" Marco's legs seemed to give out, and he reached for the nearest chair to steady himself. His face had transformed from anger to something Elena couldn't identify, shock, maybe, or recognition, or something deeper. "What was your mother's name?" "Isabella," Elena said slowly. "Isabella Rodriguez. But I don't understand." "Rodriguez was her married name," Marco interrupted, his eyes now glistening with tears. "Before that, she was Isabella Moretti." He looked up at Elena, and his voice broke. "She was my sister." The restaurant seemed to tilt on its axis. Elena stared at this stranger, this cruel man who'd tried to throw her out, and tried to process what he was saying. "That's impossible," she whispered. "My mother never mentioned," she said she had no family. Marco sank into the chair, covering his face with his hands. When he looked up again, tears were streaming down his cheeks. 30 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life," he said. "Isabella fell in love with your father, a good man, but poor, not from our world. My parents wanted her to marry someone wealthy, someone who could elevate our family's status. I was young and stupid and obsessed with appearances." His voice cracked. "I told her if she married him, she was no longer my sister. I told her she was dead to me." Elena felt her own tears falling now, hot against her cold cheeks. She tried to reach out over the years, Marco continued. Letters, phone calls. I returned them all unopened, unanswered. I was too proud, too stubborn to admit I'd been wrong. And then, he paused, his shoulders shaking. 5 years ago, I got a letter that I did open. It was from a hospital, saying Isabella had passed away. By the time I tried to find her family, to find you, the trail had gone cold. He stood slowly and walked toward Elena, his hands trembling. I gave her that necklace when she was 16. Our grandmother had given it to me to pass on to her. It was supposed to remind her that she was a star, that she could shine no matter where life took her. Elena looked down at the pendant she'd worn every day since her mother's death, the one linked to a past she'd never fully understood. Her mother had never spoken about her family, and Elena had assumed they were all gone. Now she understood, they hadn't been gone. They'd turned their backs. She shined anyway, Elena said quietly, her voice stronger now. Without you, without your family. She worked 3 jobs to raise me after my father died. She made sure I went to school, made sure I had everything I needed. She taught me kindness, compassion, and dignity. She looked directly into Marco's eyes. Everything you clearly forgot. The words hit Marco like a physical blow, but he didn't flinch away from them. You're right, he said. And I can never undo the years I lost with her, the years I could have known you. But please. His voice broke again. Please give me a chance to make this right. Elena stood there, torn between the anger of abandonment and the desperate hope for connection. She thought of her mother, of the times she'd caught her staring at this very necklace with sad, faraway eyes. She thought of all the nights they'd struggled, all the times a family's support might have made the difference. But she also thought of what her mother had taught her, that everyone deserves a second chance, that forgiveness is not about forgetting but about freeing yourself from bitterness. Okay, she said finally, the word barely more than a breath. Marco's face crumpled with relief and gratitude. He turned to the restaurant full of watching eyes and said loudly, everyone, please meet my niece, Elena Rodriguez. She will be dining here tonight as my guest, as my family. He looked back at Elena. If you'll allow me. As Elena took her seat at the best table in the house, as Marco personally brought her food and they began the long, difficult conversation of rebuilding what had been broken, she realized something profound. The necklace hadn't just saved her from hunger that night. It had opened a door to a future she'd never imagined, had connected her to a past she'd never known, and had taught both her and Marco that humanity isn't measured by what we wear or what we own, but by our capacity to recognize our mistakes and find the courage to make them right. Sometimes, the most valuable things we carry can't be seen at all, until the light hits them just right.